would unfortunately be my own country, Pakistan.
It's Karachi's first day of independence, and the crowds are out to greet Pakistan's first Governor-General. Lord Louis reads a message from the King proclaiming the new dominion. Britain and Pakistan part as friends, he said, both members of the British Commonwealth of Nations.
On the 15th of August 1947, the Indian subcontinent gained its independence from Britain and would become two separate and distinct states. India with its Hindu majority and its predominantly Muslim neighbor, Pakistan. And my family's story has been entwined with the story of my country from the very beginning. My father was a young student when Pakistan was partitioned in 1947. He was fired with the zeal of patriotism. He was a great nationalist and he wanted to help Pakistan. So he became a politician like my grandfather before him and hoped to play a role in turning the newly independent Pakistan into a modern, industrialized state. But he knew that it would be a struggle, not least because Pakistan was divided between the progressives and the traditionalists who were more resistant to the idea of change. And it was a struggle which would play out even in my own family. When I was 13 years old, my mother said to me, "Now you're a young girl and you must wear the burqa too." And she put the burqa over me. And I suddenly felt the bright world grow grey. The colors of the sky faded, of the gardens, the flowers, of people, their faces became hazy. But I was very happy when my father took one look at me in the burqa and he said to me, "My daughter doesn't have to wear the veil." My father believed that I should be judged by my mind and my character and not by my clothing. He also decided that I should be educated abroad, and I left for the United States when I was 16. It was an atmosphere of intellectual curiosity. It was a time when women's rights were being hotly debated. It was a time too of the Vietnam War, and I got caught up in the anti-war movement. So it was a very exciting time for a young girl who had been so sheltered, and suddenly she was in a society where there were so many opportunities. And I thought that this great country has reached the moon because it has democracy, it has accountability, it has freedom, and why can't my country have freedom and democracy too? Back in Pakistan, the problems were mounting. All the same factions that existed at the birth of Pakistan in 1947 still existed in 1977. Capitalists against socialists, feudals against the educated, the men and women who lived in the poorer provinces against the country's rich elite. All over lay the single most organized and smoothly functioning institution in fractious Pakistan, the army. Ever since the founding of my country, the army has wielded disproportionate force. We in Pakistan have always been fearful of our much bigger neighbor India, so that when the army argued for more resources, they were usually given them, and money, which could have been spent on improving people's lives, ended up going on defense, with catastrophic results. People were so poor that they used to walk shoeless and shirtless, and all they had was one piece of cloth tied around their waist. I saw two different worlds in one country. Whenever we traveled together, my father would say that, "See how the poor people live. This is not right. This is not fair, that there should be so much wealth on the one hand and there should be so much poverty on the other hand." In 1967, my father founded the Pakistan People's Party and became the first democratically elected president of our country 3 years later. He drew up Pakistan's first constitution and promised to hold free elections every 5 years. He built schools, guaranteed a minimum wage, and forbade discrimination against women and minorities. As I see it, his government was trying to bring light to a country steeped in stagnant darkness. But not everyone was in favor of his policies. The army, which had never been a force for enlightened progressive thinking, was then under the command of General Zia-ul-Haq. Like many in the army, he viewed my father's policies with alarm and decided to do something about it. I was woken in the middle of the night with my mother knocking on my door saying, get up, and a coup has taken place. Army tanks surrounded the house. We all gathered in my father's room. We were waiting for the military to take over. So my father rang up the army chief and he said, I'm sorry, sir, I had to do this, but I'm going to hold elections and you'll be back in power in 90 days. My father told us the conversation and he said, what do you think? And I said, well, Papa, maybe he will. And he said, don't be stupid, darling. Military chiefs don't do army coups and risk their lives committing high treason to hand power back. Two months later, my father was arrested on trumped-up charges and imprisoned. And my country had to bear the tyranny of martial law under General Zia. My father's party supporters were hunted down and tortured. But the repression was not merely political. Zia was a religious extremist and had close links to Islamic organizations which shared his narrow, bigoted views. And together they forged an alliance. These reactionaries would back Zia if they, in turn, were supported by his regime. The consequences were dramatic. Zia implemented brutal and archaic laws and claimed they were Islamic. Drinking alcohol and gambling were punishable by flogging, theft by amputation, and if a woman was raped, she would be publicly beaten along with the perpetrator. Once again, the idea of Islam as a religion of peace, tolerance, and justice was being subverted. My father was sentenced to be hanged on the 4th of April 1979. It really distressed me to see my father in such terrible circumstances, but he never lost his nerve. He was very calm, he was very brave, he was very courageous to the end. He didn't want mercy from Zia. He said that I have lived my life to serve the people of Pakistan. I have not done anything wrong. I've led a dignified life and I will have a dignified death. And he was at terms with what he saw Zia planning to do against him. And when I went for my last meeting with him, I remember he gave everything away to us except a last cigar which he had. And I was, watched him smoke that cigar. And his hand did not tremble. Because to this day that memory comes to me about how the ash did not fall. And here was a man who had been told that within a few hours he would be hanged. And yet he was so calm. And there was a light in his face.
And they've tried to break our father. They've tortured him for 2 years. They couldn't do that. They tried to ruin his political name, and now they've killed him. We have nothing to be ashamed of. They have buried a martyr today.
Little did anyone suspect how events would in time come to affect much more than my father, my family, or even my country. Islamic fundamentalists, allegedly supported by Pakistan, fanned out across the world, and people everywhere would witness for themselves the depravity of these reactionaries in a cataclysm which has become a defining image of our age.